So in this video, let's talk about a very ancient text that says very interesting things about Abraham and his origin. Um, and this book is mentioned by Maimonides. He's a well-known, can say, philosopher. His full name is Moses bin Maimon, and of course, most people know him as Maimonides, and some people call him Rambam. Now, Maimonides lived in the 12th century. He was born in Cordoba, Spain. He lived in Morocco for a little bit, then he moved to Egypt, and he was a physician. And at some point, he became a personal physician to Saladin. Now, Saladin was the first sultan of Egypt and Syria. He was a sultan in the 12th century. So Maimonides was his personal physician for a while. He used to treat him and his family. Now, Maimonides was also someone who wrote a lot of books, and one of his well-known books is The Guide for the Perplexed, and it's a book I'd recommend you read, especially if you struggle with the questions of how religion and science relate. It's a very interesting book. Now, in that book, he talks about so many things, but then he also talks about this book that he read, a book that is titled The Nabatean Agriculture. Now, the Nabatean Agriculture, he says he read a copy that was translated by a guy who went by the name Bin Washia. Now, he read this copy, it's a translated copy. Several sources, or some sources, say that this is the copy that still exists, but there are very few of them, and they can be found in a few institutions and libraries around the world. And there is a talk that this book is about 20,000 years old. It's a very ancient book. Now, this book is written about a people who were called the Sabeans. Now, the Sabeans came from the kingdom of Sheba. I think the word Sheba is more common than Sabeans. Now, the Sabeans had an empire that stretched all the way from southern Arabia, all the way to the Horn of Africa, that's Ethiopia and Eritrea. And that's why some people think, or some people believe, that Sabeans were black. It can be debatable. And the reason why that is said so is because, Sheba, the queen of Sheba, the story, of course, has been told so many times, and often it is said that she came from Ethiopia. And in fact, the dynasty, the last dynasty that ruled Ethiopia, that ended with the death of Haile Selassie, they claimed to come from Queen Sheba. Yeah, so that's the relationship between Ethiopia and the Sabeans. Now, Maimonides says that the book claims that Abraham was a Sabean. He came from the Sabeans. And Maimonides doesn't seem to disagree, even though he disagrees a lot with many things that are said in the book. And he says that Abraham was kind of a rebellion in that society, because the Sabeans used to worship many gods, and in particular they worshipped the sun and the stars. And at some point, Abraham did not agree with that, and he started teaching about worshiping God as a single entity, the creator. And that made him have a lot of problems with the people who ruled in the Sabean society, in particular the king during that time. And Maimonides says that the book says he was arrested and thrown into prison, and they tried to force him to stop preaching those ideas of there are not many gods, there is one God, and he refused, and they took away his property and chased him from Kutha. Now, Kutha is a place where he was born according to that text. Of course, we know from the Bible, or the Bible tells us that he was born in Ur. But this text, the Nabatean Agriculture, says that he was born in Kutha. And Kutha was a major city in the Sabean Empire. and he left. And yeah, so then the text doesn't follow him that much. At least Maimonides doesn't follow it so much after that, where he went. But then he goes ahead to tell us some of the other things that are in the book. He tells us that there were so many absurdities in the book. And while he encourages the reader, and in this case, the Guide for the Perplexed was written for his son-in-law, while he encourages the son-in-law to go read the text, he warns him to be careful so that he doesn't fall under its spell, especially on ideas like the tree of knowledge of evil and good, and about the story of the serpent, and about something to do with a garment that Adam wore. Now, these books again talks about Adam, according to what Maimonides tells us. He gives it as one of the absurdities in the book. He says that the book explains that Adam wasn't the first man, and that Adam was a prophet, and he was just a prophet from a society, and the society apparently came from was in India. That was Maimonides says that Adam came from India, and that society came from was in India, and he came to Babylon, and he brought with him many things. He brought with him some plants, and yeah, he mostly mentioned some interesting plants that he brought to Babylon. And yeah, he says the book also talks about Noah, but while the Sabeans approved of Adam, they disapproved of Noah, because Noah was among the people who started preaching about one God, while the Sabean society was polytheist. And so the book kind of like doesn't approve of the activities of Noah, but it approves of the activities of Adam as a prophet. Another thing Maimonides tells us that the book explains in detail. It gives instructions on how to do witchcraft in particular, and how to work with demons and evil spirits and things like that. It seems like the book goes into very detailed explanations about different ways of doing witchcraft. It also talks about the day-to-day life among the Sabeans. It also talks about and gives very detailed instructions about how to do farming. In fact, the title of the book is the Nabatean Agriculture. It gives very strict instruction on how to plant crops, how to mix them, how not to mix them, and things like that. Now, so Maimonides talks about this book. He himself insinuates that it's a very old text. And then others have said it's actually a very ancient text. As I've said, it has been mentioned that the text is as old as 20,000 years. A few copies exist, but not the original copy, or original copies, we can say, in the original language, the language of the Sabeans. But it exists in an Arabic language, a copy that was written by bin Washia. And that's the copy that still exists. A few copies, apparently, in a few institutions and a few libraries around the world. Yeah, so the book kind of shares a different perspective to what we get from the Bible, especially regarding Adam and regarding Abraham. And yeah, Maimonides encourages the reader to read the book, but to be very wary of the absurdities in the book, and to be careful not to fall into the spell of the book, of the ideas that are shared in the book. Those are my random thoughts.